Hey, it's day 8, lunch and learn experience of the Family Business Life 9-day transformation challenge. And I tell you, this has been an awesome ride. Now, if you're live and you've been with us during this time, certainly appreciate you being with us, rocking with us. If you're on demand and you're checking out the recordings and you're getting transformed because of what's challenging right now. Appreciate you for rocking with us. Certainly look forward to you rocking with us in the community as far as being in the position to where you're growing with those who are growing in the context of achieving family business life mastery and you experiencing those quantum leaps and not just the leaps, you see. So this has also been an interesting ride and being able to share this content in this unique way on this platform in this particular strategy. And I'm so appreciative of being able to move in this direction and executing this particular challenge and making this content available for you and so many others. I think the biggest impact as it pertains to any of the guest conversations I've had was with Larry Rollerson. Man, that was such a magnificent conversation. He gave so much value about so many different things that I really didn't look at in that way. And he caused me to see how important it is to really get more of this perspective in front of our CEOs, business owners, and executives, their HR persons, and the people who are really influencing the content that's getting in front of so many different people related to this whole idea of work-life balance and how just like I started with work-life balance, it starts with work-life balance for a whole lot of other people. You challenge that framework and that perspective, that ideology of work life balance, and it has a totally different dynamic. I want to make sure I appreciate awareness elevation and speaking about Larry. It's a great segue. Larry as the vice president of operations, and then you have Linan as well as James Powell, who are the powerhouse folks. All of these wonderful people are adding so much value to people's lives through awareness elevation. They're also doing so not just with the folks in the business world, they're also doing it with students in the schools. And so they're really working to influence our future generation. And so they've been a magnificent and valued partner with Team 3L in this 9-day transformation challenge. And certainly appreciate them positioning people who join this community on the other side to experience access to their, I think it's called Champion Leadership Academy content. And so that's exciting. I'm excited that they're making that available as a connection opportunity for those who join the Family Business Life Mastery community. So without further ado, let's get into our lunch and learn focus. We've been talking about the perspective of what was I doing there? That's not what I was trying to do. Yeah, this is what I was trying to do. Okay. We've been talking about the trilogy of transformation as it pertains to being able to eliminate family life crashing and burning, destroy the cause of family life crashing and burning, and be on the trajectory to access that which is family business life mastery. And we talked about the misleading beliefs. And so that was day 1 through 3. We talked about those misleading beliefs. Certainly encourage you to go back and check out those lunch and learn experiences. Days 4 through 6 were the accurate beliefs. And now, days 7 through 9, we're focusing on the master keys. And yesterday, we focused on master key number 1, which is treasure. We talked about the importance of making sure that we treasure principles and make sure we have principles as the treasure in our hearts, in our subconsciouses, so that when we have the circumstances and the dynamics and the realities related to family life and business life, when we're trying to achieve flow between family life and business life, when we're trying to make fuel between family life and business life, when we're trying to create focus between family life and business life, when we're operating in those beliefs, well, we have the perspectives and the principles in our subconscious to draw from so that we can take the appropriate actions and have the appropriate engagements in regard to family life and business life being teammates, not opponents. And we're certainly going to talk about the teammates and opponents perspective today. But as we segue into really talking about the aspect of this master key, I want us to think about our topic. And our topic is language adaptation. Okay. Language adaptation. And in regard to understanding language adaptation, I want to remind you, if you are following us and from last session of the Lunch and Learn talking about treasure, you know that I really put a lot of emphasis on the front end from an introductory perspective about communication. And the reason I did that is because while it is important that we deal with these beliefs, it is important that we understand family life and business life are meant to be teammates and not opponents. While it's so important that we deal with alignment, deal with flow, deal with fuel, all those different things, we got to know that at the core of family life and business life, being treated as opponents rather than as teammates as they're meant to, is communication breakdown. There's a restriction in the transfer and the transition of perspective between the two, which means that there is a challenge of what? Principles being able to be predictably productive all the time, which is the subject matter of yesterday. Now, with regard to that, it's so important that we understand communication in regard to language adaptation, because language is the thing that connects our imagination to our connection through unification and our execution through implementation. We've got to understand that if there's going to be alignment, therefore flow created, flow achieved between family life and business life, there's the understanding that there needs to be a chain of access from one to the other. Now, the dynamics are different in family life and business life. They are very unique. There's intimacy in business life and there's intimacy in family life, but they carry different outer workings, right? A lot of people don't want to talk about that term. That's okay. I'm okay with talking about it because I'm the family business life mastery coach. It's my specialty, and I have great comfort in being able to talk about those things. So if you're uncomfortable with it, that's fine. I'll get you comfortable with it. But understand that the aspect of family life and business life, each one of them, we've talked about this, they are unique elements, but they have a relationship, and the relationship has a role. But within the context of the relationship, there are roles. Now, within the context of roles comes the language that gives perspective to the role, which means this: the words, the verbiage determine what the expectations are. And if you don't understand the words related to the role, then you cannot understand what's expected of you, and therefore you cannot execute. Which is why when you go back to work life balance not being achievable, the words constructed the way they are constructed in a manner that they are connected with insanity, simply because they are not connected with an understanding of really the dynamics of family life and business life. See, there's an issue in the utilization of the language, and therefore there's a issue in the understanding and the perspective of the dynamics, because you don't understand the nature. See, in the context of language, language carries nature with it. You know, it's a very unique thing, right? language carries a sense of not only understanding, not only clarity, which they do, language carries a sense of syntax. Oh, that's a big word. Syntax is one of those words that's used in grammar a lot, but in a lot of instances, today the people who are coders, they understand that word a lot. The syntax means the dynamics of the language, which ensure that there is an absolute predictable result, predictable connection to what's being conveyed so that whatever system you're using can respond appropriately. For example, I'm going to use a very basic perspective from when I was doing data programming. One of the most exciting and my most favorite programming functions to use, and this is a very easy one, is if then statements. They're called conditionality statements. All right. One of the things you got to understand about conditionality statements is when a condition is communicated in regard to the if thens, what you're looking for to happen is this evaluation of your data to determine one, is there presence? Then, if there's presence, something should happen. If you don't provide the appropriate parameters for the conditionality in that statement, then you're going to get some results. You're just not going to get the results you're looking for. Okay. So it's very important that you understand one, your data when it comes to conditionality statements with data analysis. Understand your data, know what you're looking for your within your data, know what you want your data to communicate to you, know what you're trying to understand from your data so that you can be able to ensure that the way you build your conditionality statement is going to provide you the information and the data that you're actually looking for. All right. Now, listen, if you have no clear understanding of what a conditionality statement does, then you don't have really an understanding of your data source and what the data source has in it and all the different things that you have the accessibility to. Then you're going to put yourself in a position to where you're trying to get information, don't really know how to make use of the information, and then you can't get the data or the results that you're looking for from the data. And therefore, if you continue to pursue it, not having all of that information, you are an insane data analyst. Why? Because you don't have the true clarity of communication with the system, nor with the different aspects and elements that help the system to function so you can actually get the results you want. And that's what a lot of people are doing with family life and business life. Now, in regard to this second master key that we're going to be dealing with, it's absolutely important that we really bring communication to bear because, as I've said, as it pertains to this topic, that it deals with language. Now, adaptation, real quickly, let's deal with that adaptation. It's very simple. You get the point. Adaptation is the term which says that I need to conform to, I need to make an adjustment to, I need to position myself to transform to the context of something. All right. And so, what we are really seeking with regard to family life and business life is the importance of the translation of certain principle from one to the other. Okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it because that is exactly what the second key is. This second master key is for how to achieve family business life mastery. Now, let's talk about this. I'm going to move to the next slide because I think I'm going to spend a little more time here. I live in the Texas area, and Texas was at one point a part of Mexico, and there's you know um, a lot of different, history in Texas with regard to the battle of San Jacinto, which was the huge and pivotal battle with regard to the liberty from Mexico and Texas being able to have, its own territory and all that kind of stuff. Like, pretty cool. All right. I found myself, even as it's kind of interesting I'm talking about this, because my survey research analyst role was at the community college in the Texas area that bears the name of that famous battle. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, one of the things you got to know as to why I bring that up is, even though Texas is Texas and it's a United States country, we are in a position today where in Texas there are a lot of Mexican immigrants who are here, Spanish immigrants, and of course immigrants from a number of different places, but Mexican immigrants in a very unique manner, specifically in the greater Houston conglomerate of Mexican immigrants, people who are descendants of Mexican immigrants, and who are American born themselves, but they're Spanish speakers as their first language, and then in many instances English speakers as their second language. But then those who are born in many instances into families of immigrants who are of that context, they find themselves being in the position to be native English speakers, and Spanish is kind of their second language. And then you even have today where there are some who are just native English speakers and they don't speak any Spanish. Now, why is Leo bringing this up? Leo's bringing it up because today, with the overwhelming number of people who speak Spanish as their first language, and in many instances their only language in the Houston area, there's like this dynamic of transition where you're starting to see more and more Spanish language, and it's like you start to feel like, man, I need to learn Spanish, right? And now on the one hand, that can feel like you're just being forced to, just like learn somebody else's language and things of that sort. But it actually meets with history. In history, there has been a continual change of dominant languages. I mean, English for some time has been the dominant language, but there was a time where Greek was the predominant language. Even there were some aspects of Aramaic that tended to be a predominant language. There was a time where Latin was the predominant language, and one of the ways you really saw that was the Catholic Church, had a huge influence in, Latin being the main language that was being spoken and communicated over their congregational efforts. And people would speak different languages. The priests would, communicate their messages in different languages, and they would be in the position to where they would find themselves actually what's the word communicating to those people, and the people are not understanding that um they're not understanding anything that's being said, by the priest. Give me 1 second here. And so what happened is, there were efforts by a number of people to communicate in a translated way for the the congregants who would be listening, because they believed it was very important that the folks would make sure that they understood what was being communicated. They thought it was a disservice that these folks were sitting in the congregation hearing something in Latin, but they spoke different languages, and there was a number of different situations like that. Now, the reason I bring that up is because those people who fought against the idea of Latin being um, the predominant language of the communication of the priest and the leadership, and the people didn't speak the language, they perceived that their reason for doing so was to be adverse to those folks. Because if you really are communicating to somebody in such a way that it's going to be of value to them, you want them to understand, you want them to make sense of what's going on, right? That's the truth. You do want them to make sense of what's going on. And so when there is an issue or a breakdown in communication, or that there's a lack of understanding, there's really the communication that there's a need for there to be adaptation in the language. But before it is viewed that there needs to be language adaptation, in many instances there's a perception that there's opposing circumstance, and therefore whatever communication situation is going on, there's a perception of opponents being at the very core of it. Now, let's look at it. We have this saying that family life and business life are meant to be teammates, not opponents. We've also established, in the context of the accurate beliefs, that you need to have a thought process of the awareness that family life and business life are related to each other, in that they are not independent of each other or even dependent of each other, but that they are actually interdependent of each other. And we can see that worked out in the other accurate beliefs. That is, that they are able to make fuel between one another. They are designed to make fuel between one another, and that they are designed to be aligned in order to achieve flow. So if you got family life and business life on the continuity structure, they're achieving flow, right? They're making fuel, and therefore operating as interdependent. Guess what? They're not opponents, they're teammates. They're working together. The language between the two is well communicated. Let's pause for a moment. Is it well communicated? Well, if they're flowing, of course. If they're making fuel, yes. If they're operating interdependently, yes. But how do you get there? It starts with language adaptation. And language adaptation is first important to understand with regard to the context of opponents. I use the Spanish piece because here where I live, and for some years in my life to this point, I have seen that Spanish is critical. Now, I am sensitive to the reality of this, and continue to say to myself, I will learn Spanish. I will learn Spanish. I must learn Spanish. Now, let me say, as a little caveat, this is kind of unrelated, but I think it's of value to communicate that Americans are pretty much the only people in the world who think it's okay to know just one language. I'm just being honest with you. You travel the world and you find that most people know, as a foundation, at least two languages. And even those who continue to progress and grow and position themselves in a unique way in excelling in other countries, a lot of times the way they do it is they have to do it through language adaptation. They have to learn another language so that they can be able to understand what the dynamics are of that culture, to be able to integrate. Hmm. Now, I keep talking about Spanish for myself, but I believe there's a powerful perspective in this. I'm sensitive to Spanish being something that is a greater need, not because I feel like I'm being inundated by people who speak Spanish and they're unwilling to learn English. But I see that there's an opportunity to serve people in a unique way. And so I feel impressed upon, compelled to really stretch myself, challenge myself in learning a language that, one, I did not understand or know, or consider to be important, but it is something of great value. I'm gonna come back to that. But there's another side that I saw growing up where the more Mexican immigrants and people of, Latin American descent and Spanish descent and, people of other languages as well would come into the greater Houston area where, I lived, and a lot of people, grew up that were older than me. I saw this sense of animosity toward these folks who barely speak good English. Or in other words, they just barely speak English. There's a sense of judgment that would take place with these folks, to where I remember hearing, and I'm saying this so that you know what I experienced and to set up the context of what's going on, but I certainly don't agree with this perspective. I remember hearing, man, they need to go back to Mexico. You know, um, they need to go back from where they came. You know, they need to learn our language. But here's the thing: is there anything wrong with learning their language? Is there anything wrong with adapting to a different language? No. As a matter of fact, that's the same thought process when it comes to business, business life, and family life. And I'll tell you a quick story in just a moment. But what I want you to understand is that there is, as I said in the session number 6, where I talked about um, the, what you call it, the accurate belief number 3, where we talk about the fact that there's an interdependency between family life and business life, which means we must believe that we are to create focus between them. That is reconciled relationship clarity. In other words, we now see the relationship for what it ought to be. We have clarity about what the relationship is to be, but understand this was what the relationship was designed for, which is why the thought process of reconciled comes into the place. We're being brought back to really what this relationship of family life and business life is and was designed to be. Now, with that said, it's so important that we have this awareness that if family life and business life are meant to be teammates and not opponents, the question we have to ask is, if they were meant to be that, that means they were meant to communicate with one another and in between one another, and that the distinctions of them, the independency of them, was able to well operate within the dependency of them, which is why they're interdependent. And that means that even though they have different contexts in certain regards, different aspects, different levels of intimacy, different contexts of connection, that there is enough similarity in them to where what's in them is able to translate from one to the other. Not the sense of family life need to go back to where it came from, or business life need to go back to where it came from, or family life need to stay to where it is, and business life need to stay where it is, which is going back to that misleading belief of believing one is more important than the other. Most people choose business life to be more important than the other, but there are some people who are trying to elevate family life to be more important than business life. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that at the core of it, family life is probably the one you want to put your greatest emphasis in as far as setting a foundation for the business life. But I don't think that you need to just go and just get all into family life and eliminate business life, or the vice versa. All right. The truth is, as it pertains to translate related to the master keys, is that translate means to take that which is predictably productive all the time in business life and translate it to family life. Why do we do that? Is because the truth is we have put more emphasis into the language of business life and understanding the language and knowing the dynamics and being able to be successful and achieve at the highest level and to be most excellent in business life, to the degree that we can very fluidly engage with business life. But we have a challenge in engaging with family life because we have not really dealt with the context of what family life's dynamic is, what the role of family life is, what the relationship is of family life, and the different nuances of it, because we didn't even understand that those two had relational reality. Okay. That's why we were saying work life balance. I mean, let's just think about this real quickly. There was absolutely an opposing perspective about work life, about family life and business life in the very presence of work life balance, because work life is a type of life. It's one type of life, work life. It's not a representation of both your family life and your work life or your business life. And so here it is, you're trying to balance work life, which is one thing. Come on now. And balance, in its definition, says that it has to have opposing objects, something that is against the other in order to give some type of equilibrium outcome measurement. So you got one thing and you trying to balance one thing, it don't work. It can't work. It will never work. I'm not trying to get on the tangent about work-life balance. I want you to see that it doesn't make sense from a language level and therefore from a practical level, which shows that there was an absolute verbal communication against family life, to the degree, listen to me carefully, that you couldn't really see that the achievement principles and the language of success and achievement in business life actually comes from family life. See, let me share something with you. I want to make sure you understand that there are some things that are just self evident. And one of the things that is self evident is the fact that when we're born, we're not born into business. Even if your family owns a business, even if your family has a trust, has corporations, has investment portfolio and all, we're born into the family. The business is not even present. I don't care if you're born in the hospital, if you're born in a house, if you're born in a birthing center. It doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter where. The fact is, when the baby begins to crown, that that area of the mother, of their reproductive structure, and emerge from out of her womb, that child is closest to the family, physically closest to the family. See, I'm even thinking about when, more so my second daughter was born, and, first daughter was born in the hospital, second daughter was born in a birthing center. And the second daughter was born, my wife was in the tub, and, she was born in the water, obviously. And there's this thing where, when a child is born underwater, the thing you do is you take the child from under the water, you bring them up, and generally the first thing you want to see happen is for that child to sit right here in what they call the kitchen. This is the bosom area, old school term, bosom area. Sit right here in the kitchen, and that right there is designed to create this bond that existed inside of the womb, now outside of the womb, through the exchange and the release of oxytocin. Come on now. Huh. I know I'm getting a little scientific and deep here. Huh. But then after that experience, once, mom and babe, do their thing, then it's encouraged for, dad to take the child and put the child in the kitchen, skin to skin, so that there's an exchange of oxytocin there. One of the elements is the child is next to the heart of that parent, and they're listening to the heartbeat. Now, mind you, the child, while in the womb of the mother, was able to hear the heartbeat in a very unique way. And now they get to resonate with and connect with the fact that, oh, that's the heartbeat I heard on the inside. Now I hear it on the outside, right? But when it comes to the father, and they get to park in that kitchen, now they get to hear not just the heartbeat, because they were not necessarily connected with the heartbeat. They get to hear the tone of breathing, because that tone of breathing is also connected with the voice that they heard while inside of the womb. Here's my point. The point is that they are first and foremost connected with the family. Watch this. In the business, when a person becomes a part of the business, you have orientation. You have expectations with regard to what the assignment is. There's acquainting with the uh the colleagues, the team. People are getting to know each other and all that kind of stuff. I wonder where that came from. It came from the family. See, the truth is, we are experiencing things in the family naturally because we're still engaged in family, but we're not doing it intentionally with great clarity of awareness. We're not looking at the fact that the things that are happening in business have an absolute picture of similarity and synonymity. Synonymous is the word, that they actually are the same, such that they're able to, in their unique dynamics, provide so much value so that they can release from their flow aspects and their fueling aspects and their interdependent functions into the other. There's got to be some language adaptation that's taking place. We've got to make sure we're looking at what are we doing to excel in business and getting results, and how does that translate to what we need to be doing to excel in the family life and get results. One of the things Lynn Ann said in her post we talked about that she wrote on LinkedIn, why this was such an exciting opportunity for her to be a part of this 9-day transformation challenge focused on family life and business life, is because she said one of the things that people fail to communicate is, like, we go and spend, oh man, all kinds of money on developing ourselves professionally in business and in our investor roles and all those types of things. And we will have spent a fraction of the cost on our family life growth and development. Now, let me just be honest with you. That's not what Leo and Sean do. We invest in our family life. I'm talking about books, conferences, having conversations, and various other things. But we are investing. We listen to content. We listen to messages. We're following people who are speaking on these things. We do it for both. We're not just doing it for one, right? Anyway, so when it comes down to it, what you've got to understand is we have a responsibility. It is essentially, if you're going to achieve mastery in family life and business life so that they are actually teammates and not opponents, you've got to understand that for family life and business life to really be the teammates that they're supposed to be, you can't just have the accurate beliefs that are destroying, okay, the misleading beliefs. You must be actively engaged in using these master keys in order to leverage those beliefs and get the power and the punch from them that are intended. And one of the things you got to do, other than treasuring principles that are predictably productive all the time, you must translate the language of achievement from business life into family life so you can get the mastery that is designed, which ultimately the language from business really came from family. It's important that we have that awareness that family life and business life are meant to be teammates and not opponents. Teammates, not opponents. See, I use the Spanish experience because how I saw a number of people in my environment deal with those who are Spanish speakers and the increase in the numbers of Spanish speakers in the greater Houston area, and the way they dealt with them. They dealt with it from a standpoint that these people were opponents rather than teammates. I mean, here's the cool part. We got the technology that we have today, and one of the things we can do is download an app on our phone. And if somebody speaks a different language, man, like we can actually have them talk in what they're saying, find out which language they speak, have them talk it in to the phone, and then you can read it, and then you talk in your part and have them read. Like you can do that. Like that's a way of creating language adaptation, right? On a simple level, which means, again, it's like, okay, I have the ability to speak English. Well, I can look at what's happening in business, and then I can look at what's happening or not happening in family. And then I can say, okay, this is what's happening in business. What is it that's going on over here? And what principles, what achievement strategies, what concepts over here that would apply to this? And then not only do I apply it or adapt it, I then also look at, okay, so what is it that's naturally communicated as to what this really meant from the beginning, being connected with family in the first place. In other words, I just want to make sure it's clear for everybody. Language adaptation means I need to find the language that is achieving oriented in business life and adapt family life to that language. I need to adapt the language of business life to that of family life, such that I need to translate it and make sure that it is the same principle, the same perspective, the same predictability as business, but adapted to that of family as it is designed to be. That's how you make them teammates. For example, I think about basketball and how you have the necessity to communicate to your teammates when you're on defense about picks and various different things that opponent the opponents are doing. And one of the things I remember this last year, we had to really deal with this with our boys, our 8th grade boys last summer. We would always have to deal with them in communicating with one another. Like call out the picks, not just call out the picks, call out the switches, call out the different plays that you're seeing, that call out the zone, call out what's happening, right? And it's wrong. Watch this. It's wrong to see it happening to your teammate, and that you can communicate it to your teammate and not tell your teammate that it's getting ready to happen, or how to at least understand it. So you might say, "Hey, he's coming." You may not be able to say something else, but you say he coming. Now you've gotten attention to be able to communicate it. Now that may not be very helpful, but if you're talking about a screen, you say, "Hey, screen right, screen left." You got to create it to where it can communicate to them the action that they need to take. And as it pertains to family life and business life, being teammates, not opponents, there being mastery between family life and business life, and there being flow achieved, there being fuel made, there being focus created, there's got to be the appropriate language for both that causes both of them to be predictably productive all the time, which is why you've got to treasure principle. And you've got to not only treasure principle, but you got to put that principle in the treasure protected place, which is your subconscious. And you've got to make sure you guard what can come against that principle. You also guard if it's perpetrating this principle, that it don't get in, right? Just like the bank account, you just can't put anything in there. You can't just take anything out, right? With all of that being said, you've got to have that principled approach as it relates to treasure. But when it comes to what you treasure in the context of principle, you got to make sure it applicably applies or appropriately applies to family life and business life in that way, which is predictably productive all the time. Okay. And so it's very important that we operate within the context of the teammate's perspective. But the only way we can really operate in the context of the teammate's perspective is by ensuring that there's an adaptation of the language that is predictably productive and is being used in the environment of business life to make us predictably productive, but it's got to be used in the family life. It's got to be used. Business life is a flow out from family life, right? Again, I said it, that the child first comes into the family. We first come into the family. We don't think business when we get here. We think mama, daddy, we think food, we think poop, we think sleep. We think all of the things that are just fundamental to the family environment. And so the parents are pivotal in being able to influence the view of that environment in pursuit of an environment greater than that. See, we don't get into business until we've come through family, until we've grown in a certain way, until we've progressed to a certain level. When we start to communicate and articulate and start moving around on our own, is where we start being awakened to business happen around us. But outside of that, we are absolutely oblivious of this whole idea of business life. It is not something that ought to be happening for us because we can't even connect with it. Oh, but when we start to make sense of it, guess what really starts to happen? We start having to adapt the language of family life to that of business life. That's why I say it actually comes from family life. And so I need to say this before I get out of here. I'm going to share a story with you, but I need to say this part. I've said it on another segment, and that is we've got to see that it is in no way, shape, form, or fashion possible to spend on a regular basis. Like in isolated situations, this is possible, but on a regular basis, it is not possible to spend the greatest amount or quantity of time in family life as is spent in business life. I want you to even see this. I'm going to give you a picture in your mind. I wish I would have thought about this before, because I would have given you an illustration, an illustration, a prop to look at, a slide. You got to understand that business requires more quantity of time than quality of time. And family requires more quality of time than more quantity of time. I got to say this again. Like, this was a powerful picture in my head. Business requires more quantity of time than quality of time. And family life requires more quality of time than quantity of time. It is because the covenant relationship is a powerful and covered relationship that quality impressions at times of pivotal experience have so much weight and value just because of the connection that exists from a family standpoint. But business and the people in family, they are life oriented. They are vested at a level of blood. They are vested at a level of identity, DNA, all those different things. You don't have any of those things in business. A business is created by us. A business is then given perspective and vision by us. We were created to be in family, and the vision for family was not created by us. We came into it, operated, functioned, and established already. But we must establish businesses. So it requires us to give life to it. As a result of it requiring us to give life to it, business, then we must give so much time, energy, and effort to it. Whereas over here, life exists in and of itself by us being productive and fruitful in the reproductive manner. And that in and of itself speaks volumes for itself. And it enriches us by continuing in that. It doesn't require the same amount of time, though it requires quality more than quantity. But this one over here, business life, it requires more of the quantity of time. It needs your physical presence more. See, listen to me. As I close, Larry said it's so important to get the right perspective about this family life and business life, and debunk and destroy this whole idea of work-life balance. Because if you tell your spouse you need to make, your personal time equal to your professional time, when you went together at the beginning and looked at what the details were of this role y'all wanted this one person to take, and it says on there 75% travel, and you said yes and you agreed and co-signed, and then you come back and say to this person you need this time over here with family to equal this time over here with business, you wrong. You are absolutely wrong. You have made family life and business life an opponent. You're wrong. That's dangerous, because you have supposed to deal with these two contrary to their natures. You got to make them flow into one another and out of one another. You got to make them fuel one another. You got to make sure there's focus created between them. And for you to know that there is a 75% travel for this job, you agree to it, and then you're over here saying that I need you to spend equal amount of time in family life as you do in business, you're wrong. You're actually creating opposition. You're not creating focus, right? It's not cool. But if you understand that and you say, you know what? Okay. Well, you agreed at the beginning, but said, hey, I think some things have changed. You're creating focus. I think some things have changed. You're trying to make sure there's fuel, make fuel. I think some things have changed. You're trying to make sure there's alignment and flow. I think some things have changed, and maybe we need to reconsider, not because this job is not working, but some things have changed, and we got to make sure that there's flow between, and that there's fuel being made, and that there's focus being created. Maybe we need to rethink this and begin to look for a different role. Maybe that's the timing. And let me say this real quick. I need to kind of talk about this. I might not get to share my story. I see. It's important to understand that when you start a job, it might mean that you might have thought you would be there for 10, 15 years, maybe even 5. And you may only really have needed to be there for 1. And the dynamics of family life have a way of helping you understand if there's a different season that you're getting ready to go into where you need a different type of role. Maybe you need to get a promotion. Maybe you need to seek a different role within the company. It may be that as the case. But the idea is, if you have the appropriate language adaptation and you have the alignment that you should have, where there's flow being achieved, you have the focus being created, you have the very aspect of fuel being created, you can see, okay, this is not about quality of time, but I'm sorry, this is not about quantity of time, but the quality of time is being affected, and the quantity of time is not necessarily the issue, but now the quantity of time over here is becoming such that it's affecting even the quality in that. And you see, it's, you got this whole way of being able to evaluate it. I don't want to confuse you. I just want you to see how it starts to be to where there's energy and generation of ideas and thought process and evaluation in the context of this. In other words, you're elevating your questions and your answers from being that of just going to people, but they're now with yourself. And in the context of questioning and answering related to, is my flow taking place the way it should be? Is my fuel taking place the way it should be? Is my focus existing the way it should be? Then you are moving consistently and very considerably valuably in the way of family business life mastery. Let me tell you a story real quick. I talk about it in my book, I Hate My Wife, a new view on hatred in marriage. And that is where I talk about the fact that I had to call my wife. She was just needy. She would always say, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. And I'd be like, man, don't nobody had this many needs. I was really judging that based on myself. Like I rarely use the term need, because I really got to a point in my youth where I stopped asking my parents for things just because I felt like, anytime I asked them, they'd say no. And so I was like, well, I guess I don't need that. So, I really was trying to make a decision for myself that I really had not the ability to ask. So I should have kept asking and let them give me perspective about my asking so I could grow in being able to ask in certain ways that would be truly effective, right? But I didn't do that. Well, that being the case, there's this reality that when it came to my wife, she was very comfortable talking about her needs. She was very comfortable talking about what she needed and talking about how much she needed, how soon she needed, a lot of other things. And me, I was just like, man, that's just weird. And then one day I asked my wife, question and answer, VIP question and answer. I asked her, I said, what is your definition of need? So I listened to her. And once she shared with me, I said, let me get this straight. So are you telling me that when you say you need something, what you're saying is there's something that you're seeking to achieve, and you start with the things that you have in order to achieve that, and everything in between is pretty much what you need? She's like, yeah. I broke down crying, folks. Let me just tell you the truth. Leo cries. Every man should cry, by the way, for good reasons. But I was disturbed by the fact that I really just disregarded her. Why did I break down and cry? I broke down because the truth of the matter was I realized what my wife had just said, she thinks, feels, believes, is what I do in business every day. At the time is what I thought. It's like I call that identifying your gap and closing it. There's a lot of different ways we deal with that. Some of them call them gap analysis and stuff like that. We got a strategy for that in business, and I was good at it. That's how I solved a lot of problems. I saw the gap. I was like, oh, this is your problem. Get this. And I never saw how that very thought process translated to what my wife was saying. And what that meant was I had rendered myself ineffective in being able to serve her at the highest level because I did not adapt the language of achievement from business to that of family, because I was never really taught to do it. I never really was given the perspective to look at it that way. I don't want you to be that way. I don't want you to be that way. And I want you to take this content and make it your principle. I want you to take this content, all that's been shared. We got one more day, but I'm saying this as I close. I want you to take all that's been shared, and I want you to go and put it in your heart, put it in your subconscious, put it in your account, put it in that special place. Like you go take your money and put it in your bank account or put it in your investment accounts or your trust or whatever you're doing. Take these truths, these perspectives, these accurate beliefs, these principles, and put them in that special place that is designed to be the storehouse and the storage access point for you related to your achievement of mastery between family life and business life. Adapt the language of achievement from business into family life, to family life as it is designed to be, so that you can really start winning, thriving, and vibing at family life and business life, and get off of this trajectory of family life crashing and burning while business life is perceptively thriving and vibing. All right. So I just want to, as I close, make sure that you can enjoy this very reality of family, business, life mastery with us. We want to take you further. We want to take you deep. We want to put you on that trajectory and see you experience those quantum leaps. You hear me now? I want you to join the family, business, life mastery community. And it's very easy to do that. There's a few ways. One, if you're watching by YouTube, there's in the description a link that you can click in order to get to the team30.com/FBLM community site so you can actually sign up and start your monthly connection and subscription. But also, you can get there through LinkedIn. There's a way to do so there. You can get there through the direct website, which I've actually shared with you. You can see on the lower thirds of the screen. And then mm, you can get there just by believing that it's possible to get there. You see, mastery is a powerful thing, and I want to see you achieve it because I see the value of it in my own family life. I appreciate my conversation with Imani Adria today in our mastermind experience. Make sure you go back and check that out. She kind of ended up interviewing me in some regards, but it was a mastermind conversation, wasn't an interview. So um, check that out. One of the things she said to me, she's like, "I love the brand." She calls it a brand. The perspective that we use with our daughters, which is do what's expected when it's expected with the right attitude, tell the truth. She's like, man, that's such a brand. It's like that's a legacy perspective, that really talks about what it is you guys really represent. And, the truth is when you have, intentionally minded people who want to see you be and do what it is that you want to do, it makes all the difference in the world. And so I'm going to say this again as we get ready to sign off. You can take everything that we have shared here and still got to share for one more day. You can take everything and you can grow by leaps. Trust me, you can leap and bound, by the way. But you don't really get the access of that which is quantum leaps. So I want to encourage you to join the community so you can connect with those people who are pursuing family business life mastery as well, and you can leverage the growth that they're experiencing for yourself, whether you're dealing with the same things or not, because in that is the exponential value of quantum leap type of growth. Y'all be great over there. You hear me now?